everybody, I'm Robin, the Red River historian, and for over 20 years I have been researching, documenting, and sharing the history of the Red River Valley, where the South meets the West, that runs through Texas, Oklahoma, Louisiana, and Arkansas on my website, redriverhistorian.com. And today I'm taking you to one of the most historic places in the Red River Valley, and that's Natchitoches in Natchitoches Parish, Louisiana. Natchitoches is the oldest city in the Louisiana Purchase. Originally a Natchitoches village, the Natchitoches were part of the Caddoan language and tribal affiliation. Its colonial era began in 1702 when Louis Jugereau de Saint-Denis, a French-Canadian envoy, encountered their village. The village was destroyed in a flood, and the French and the Natchitoches left the area. They then returned in 1714 to establish a trading post which was named Fort Saint-Jean-Baptiste. Natchitoches grew into a French native market town. The town surrounded the fort and became a recognized parish in 1728. Over the centuries, several churches were constructed to replace each other that had been destroyed due to raids, fires, and proximity. In 1731, the Natchez tribe, on a rampage, raided, burned, and plundered the post. This led to a retaliatory war that exterminated the Natchez tribe. The Natchitoches and French people rebuilt their post on a natural rise on one of the Isles of Natchitoches. By 1737, the Catholic Church had consecrated ground just outside of the fort for all of its Catholic citizens. That included Native American, European, and people of African descent. And that's what we're exploring today. Come with me to explore the American Cemetery, the oldest cemetery in the Louisiana Purchase that was French Catholic owned. After the French defeat in the French-Indian Wars, 7 Years' War, in 1763, Louisiana Territory came under Spanish jurisdiction. The Royal Road, also known as the El Camino de Real, was extended from Las Aides to Natchitoches, and the Spanish government began to supply more permanent commercial and Catholic institutions. As the official border disputes between France and Spain became moot, so did the function of Fort Saint-Jean-Baptiste. The city of Natchitoches built around the garrison, with locals most likely harvesting materials from the fortress for their own use. The fort's church vacated the old site as well. Over the years, the parish eventually built 7 churches outside of the American Cemetery to replace previous churches that were destroyed or outlived their locations. The parish consecrated new cemeteries outside of the original graveyard, and they became the preferred burial places for the people of Natchitoches Parish. By the time of the Louisiana Purchase of 1803, the fort and the cemetery were in utter ruins. This is why the American government built Fort Claiborne north of the American Cemetery and the original fort in 1804. The 1803 Louisiana Purchase did not just bring a change of government, but also a change in settlement patterns. The Anglo-Americans that arrived brought with them their habits of decentralization, commercialization, and environmental management, all of the things that the French didn't necessarily do. The original French, Indian, African people called themselves Creole to distinguish themselves from those of English or Anglo descent. The word Creole is not to be confused with Cajun or Acadian. Creole stems from the idea of a created people. The intersections of continental European, Native American, and African people, under the horrific conditions of slavery, generated a unique cultural and ethnic blending that can be still seen in their foods and architecture. The word Creole is an ever-evolving term. It is used differently in different New World countries. In Mexico, for example, Creole originally referred only to Spanish people born in the New World. In Natchitoches, it originally meant people of only French or Spanish descent. The meaning has changed in subsequent generations. In Louisiana, Creole refers to the descendants of French, African, and Native people, and not Anglo people. As more and more people started coming into Natchitoches and Protestants started using the American Cemetery, the Catholic diocese opened up 3 new cemeteries. And that's where Catholics tend to be buried instead of the American Cemetery. And this is the one that is public and is open to the public right here. The Catholic Cemetery that was
actually started in 1829, I believe. It was around 1829, and then it became an official Catholic cemetery in 1860. And it has also a plethora of fascinating graves, just like the American cemetery.
Like this one where the tombstone's gone missing. Or this one where you can see above ground tombs that outsiders tend to associate with New Orleans and its cities of the day.
The Anglo-Americans continued to use the cemetery, so the Creoles began calling it the American Cemetery. But the Anglos kept some of the Creole customs, such as not segregating by race, on their burials. So let's go explore some of these burials here in the American Cemetery. A very historical tombstone is that of Dr. Johnsibley, who was an Indian agent at the first factory. That's what they called Indian agencies in the territorial period. That was over by the Sulphur River just north of Natchitoches. And then he came over to Natchitoches, and he's the one who communicated with Thomas Jefferson about the Thomas Freeman expedition. He's the one that talked about the Red River meteorite, or the medicine stone, that he funded an expedition to take from the Wichitas and Comanches. He is just very important in early Louisiana Territory history, specifically in Natchitoches history, and he is buried right here in the American Cemetery. This is the grave of John Gideon Lewis. He was the founder of the first African-American Masonic Lodge in Natchitoches Parish.
John Gideon Lewis's life encompassed much of Louisiana's post-Civil War history. He came to Natchitoches after the Civil War. A teacher at the Natchitoches Parish Training School, Mr. Lewis was elected to the Louisiana legislature from 1876 to 1878, founded the Prince Hall Grand Masonic Lodge in 1903, and also acted as secretary to the Migration and Relief Association, which encouraged African Americans to emigrate to Kansas in the wake of profound racist violence in Louisiana. Civil rights leaders encouraged freedmen towns in the wake of Reconstruction and post-Reconstruction violence. Some were founded in the vicinity of the Red River inside the nations of Indian Territory, like Tatum's in today's Carter County, Oklahoma. This is yet another fascinating topic that I will explore in a video soon.
The American Cemetery is chock full of history. Everywhere you see is a history lesson. For example, the Prudhomme family plot right here has a number of Revolutionary War veterans. And this one here of Jean-Pierre Prudhomme is actually, he was a veteran of the Galvez expedition. And if you're not familiar with that, the Galvez expedition was actually a Spanish led diversion, if you will, against the English along the western frontier of the American Revolution. And this man who's buried here was part of that. So there's so many interesting stories to tell right here at the American Cemetery. Some of the most interesting graves, to me anyway, here at the American Cemetery are the French graves, the French Catholic graves, because many of them are simple iron crosses that were carved, hand carved, or hand etched rather, instead of these elaborate tombstones. And this one right here is of a French woman. When you go out to cemeteries, especially old ones, try to find a crepe myrtle. Here along the Red River, crepe myrtles were often used as garnishment. You know, they were purposely planted. But these suckers grow hard and they grow wide. And actually what I like about this is you can see where the fence is actually going, or the gate is going into the crepe myrtle. But not only that, there's actually a tombstone underneath this crepe myrtle. Over the years, the crepe myrtle has grown over it. Don't believe me? See the next picture.
In 2016, the corner of a granite tombstone was still visible by this crepe myrtle, underneath the crepe myrtle. It's now been swallowed by the crepe myrtle hull.
This is the grave of Edward L. Pearson. He was killed by the editor of the Natchitoches Vindicator on December 25th, 1875. There was apparently a feud between Pearson and Cosgrove, the editor, and it was due to Reconstruction politics. The editor of the Vindicator, Mr. Cosgrove, was a Democrat, and Mr. Pearson was a Republican and also part of the legislature that answered to Governor Kellogg, the Reconstruction governor, who was hated by the Southern Democrats here in Louisiana. And there's speculation that it was not simply a defense, because Cosgrove claimed self-defense in shooting Pearson. But Pearson was shot in the back on St. Denis Street, or St. Denis Street in Natchitoches. running away from Cosgrove. But Cosgrove never faced any kind of punishment or anything like that. And this kind of Reconstruction era violence was actually fairly common along the Red River, especially here in Louisiana. And that is a topic that we're going to explore soon in another video. According to contemporary sources, there was a duel that was fought here in 1836, and a man named William McMillan died, and he was buried right here in the American Cemetery where the duel was fought. And this is the around 1836 section. At least I'm finding some graves from the area, but I cannot find his grave. But isn't that convenient that he happened to be buried at the place where he was shot? There is speculation that the founder of Natchitoches, Saint Denis or Saint Denis, and the matriarch of the Cane River Creole families, Marie-Therese Coincoin, are buried here at the American Cemetery. However, research has shown that most likely they were buried at the other Catholic cemetery that was founded after the 1803 Louisiana Purchase. That cemetery is now, I believe, resting underneath the current church building, but I'm not sure exactly where that is. Maybe somebody who is listening to this video can chime in and let us know where those burial sites are, but I believe they are lost to history, and I do know that the burial records have been destroyed by fire.
Over the years, the cemetery found itself neglected. Kids even conducted firework displays and target practice inside. The ladies from Natchitoches decided to organize in the 1920s, and today, the American Cemetery Association that they founded maintains the grounds of the oldest European-derived cemetery in the Louisiana Purchase.
Thank you so much for coming out and visiting with me at the American Cemetery today over in Natchitoches, Louisiana. I'm Robin, the Red River historian. I hope that you go check out my website and also subscribe to this channel because I have a lot more videos coming up. See you soon.